Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Using OneDrive for Business. All attendees are in listen-only mode. If you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to use the QA or chat features in WebEx. It's just me today, so I'll get to those at the end of the presentation here. So my name is Jim Lapointe here, and let's get started. Okay. First, a little bit about us. Colden Company is an information technology service organization. Just means that we're computer guys and gals. And we've been in business since 2003. So in a couple of weeks, we'll be celebrating our 16 years in business. We have offices in both St. Augustine, Florida, which is where I'm talking to you from today, as well as in Ballston Spa, New York. And we hold many leading technical certifications. What's pertinent for today's presentation, Colden Company has been recognized by Microsoft as with a cloud competency. That is what OneDrive is considered with Microsoft as part of their cloud suite of services. Okay, our agenda for today, we're going to talk about what is OneDrive for Business, as well as what it is not, and then we'll talk about what are some of the benefits, and of course the flip side to that are what are things that you need to be aware of or consider. We'll actually take a break from PowerPoint and we'll actually take a look at some of the ways to access OneDrive for Business, and then we'll take some Q&A at the end. Okay, what is OneDrive for Business? At its core, OneDrive for Business is cloud file storage. So if you're familiar with Apple's iCloud or Google's Drive, this is just Microsoft's cloud file storage. It is integrated with Office 365 and is included with most subscriptions, not all. As with everything Microsoft, there's many different options, so not all of them have OneDrive for Business included, but most do. OneDrive for Business is not included if you're buying a retail copy of Office, as an example. You're not going to get OneDrive for Business with that. But with their subscription services, most of them do include that. Now, it is integrated with Office 365, so if you attended our Microsoft Teams presentation a few months ago, we talked about how any of the data that you're storing in Teams is actually being stored in SharePoint Online in the back end, which is Microsoft's cloud. This is really the same idea here. So anything that you're saving in OneDrive for Business is really being stored in SharePoint Online in Microsoft's cloud. So in describing what OneDrive for Business is, it's also important to note what it is not. And it is not the OneDrive Personal. Those are actually two different things. Let me go back here. So you see here I've got two different icons listed here, a blue cloud and a white cloud. The white cloud is the OneDrive Personal. The blue one is the OneDrive for Business. There's a few major differences. One is that the Personal OneDrive gives you 5 gigabytes of storage, whereas the OneDrive for Business gives you a terabyte of storage per user. So that's a monumental difference in capacity. So in thinking about how these are designed to be used, the OneDrive Personal is really meant for your personal documents. Just like if you're looking at your computer and you click on this PC or my computer or whatever you're used to, you've got a documents folder that is really meant for your documents. That's what OneDrive Personal is akin to. You also may have on your system a mapped drive to a shared space on the server for company documents that are meant to be shared. And that's really what OneDrive for Business is designed for. So that's the difference between the two, and they are not the same thing. And we're going to talk about some of the differences in some of the upcoming slides here as well. Okay, so that's what it is. What are some of the benefits? Well, certainly data accessibility is a big benefit. And whenever you're talking about a cloud service, that's really one of the main purposes or selling points behind anything cloud is its high uptime and availability and accessibility. And OneDrive is no exception. You do have Microsoft Cloud behind it, so it's going to give you high levels of uptime and accessibility from a myriad of devices. So if you want to get access to OneDrive from your phone or from your computer, really you can get access to it from any kind of a web browser. So the data is very accessible in OneDrive. On your local computer, you can log into OneDrive, or there is a File Explorer extension. We'll show you those when we get to the interface review portion of this. I've also listed security here as a benefit, and we're going to talk about security. On the flip side, there are some things that should be concerning as well when we talk about security with OneDrive, but let's focus on the positives for right now in this slide. First of all, OneDrive for Business gives you what's called end-to-end encryption. So that means as you're uploading files to the Microsoft Cloud, they are going to be encrypted in transit, and they're also going to be encrypted while they're sitting there in Microsoft's Cloud. And it's important to note that that's not the case with the personal OneDrive. Those files will be encrypted in transit, but not at rest with OneDrive Personal. Another important point to note here is OneDrive for Business gives the ability to synchronize files down to your local PC. If you do that, those files are not going to be encrypted by default. There is an option to do that. Our recommendation is your hard drive should be encrypted entirely at this point. If you're a Colden Company customer here listening, any computer that we've sent out in the last probably 2 years or more has been encrypted right out of the box. It's just a good precaution to take to make sure those files are safe. So if you've done that, then you don't need to really worry about if you're syncing files down, they're going to be encrypted on your hard drive. If you have an older machine or one that is not from us and it may not be encrypted, then you do need to worry about that. Other security measures is you can restrict file download from the cloud for what they call DLP, or data loss prevention. So if you're storing any type of protected information in the cloud, like health data, credit card information, social security numbers, anything that you as a business have a legal obligation to protect, you really need to consider the security of that information. So there are some nice options to restrict file download from the cloud. And something that's relatively new with OneDrive for Business, they have released about a year ago, their ransomware detection and recovery. So Microsoft is actually going to be scanning the data in their cloud for signatures of ransomware. If they think that you might have been infected, they're going to send you an email and say, hey, it looks like some of your data has been maliciously encrypted here. And there is a built-in restore where you can restore those back 30 days. So our feeling is the built-in backup that comes with Office 365 subscriptions from Microsoft is inadequate. We recommend a better backup solution. We have options for you for that to give you quicker and easier restore and more robust backup. So if you're going to be deeply using the features of Office 365, that's a recommendation we're going to have for you, is don't rely on the default Microsoft backup plan. Okay, some other benefits here. OneDrive for Business has something called version history. So you can see previous versions of files that you've modified. By default, it's going to essentially keep all versions of all of your files going back to whenever you first put them in the cloud. So that is a setting. It's nice to have all those versions, but at some point, if you're really heavily using OneDrive for Business and you start running out of space, that's something to consider. Maybe we don't need to keep every single version of every single file. Maybe we keep the latest 10 versions or something like that. So, but that version history is very nice. We're going to show you when we get to the interface review how to do that, and also what's kind of misleading, where you think you might do it, but you actually can't. Okay, next, sharing files externally. We've all had that situation where you're trying to email a large file to somebody and it gets blocked because the file is too big. OneDrive is great for that. You simply find your file, right-click on it, and choose Share. You put in the email address of the person you want to share it with, and a link will get sent to that person. So the way it works is the receiver will have a link that really essentially connects them directly into your SharePoint Online. Maybe not the most secure way, but that's how it's going to work by default. Something to think about as well. Our recommendation is when you're doing any type of external sharing like that, the link should have a timeout, and that is not the default. By default, any link that you send is going to be good forever. And our recommendation from a security perspective is not to do that and to set a timeout on any links that you send. Maybe have them good for 30 days or 90 days or whatever you think is appropriate. So another back-end setting that we recommend you change. Another nice feature of OneDrive for Business is co-authoring. And if you were a part of our team's presentation a few months ago, you saw a couple of us here at Colden Company modifying an Excel spreadsheet at the same time. And that had long been a competitive advantage of Google Sheets, and Microsoft has that functionality with their Office 365. The key to that is that you have to use the online versions of Excel or Word or PowerPoint or even Visio now. You can collaborate on any of those documents using, really the key is it's using SharePoint Online on the back end. And both OneDrive for Business and Teams are both doing that. So it's really the exact same technology that is allowing the collaboration in both of these products. So that's a nice thing. You can have multiple people pull up a spreadsheet and both be modifying it at the same time. We do that a lot here at Colden Company. If we're doing a big project and we've got multiple people working on it at the same time, we'll pull up kind of a list of tasks, and multiple people can be checking off the tasks that they're completing while they're working on it. So very handy. There's also a mobile app. It's free. Just go to your Play Store or Apple Store, whatever device you have. There's a OneDrive app there, and you can have access to the same files that you would access through a web browser on your phone. And that also gives you the Office Online as well to be able to modify those files. And the last benefit listed on our page here is the local sync, which we mentioned. You have the option to have files in the cloud, but also locally sync down to your desktop. That's very handy if you're going to go on a trip, you're going to hop on an airplane where you're not going to have internet connectivity. You download those files or sync those files down to your laptop. That way you can modify those on the plane. And then when you get where you're going and get an internet connection, you can sync those back up. That's a nice key benefit as well. Okay, as with anything, there's pros and cons, right? So we're going to talk about some of the concerns. We just mentioned the local sync. That's very handy, but you also have to worry about using up disk space. So if you're syncing down things from OneDrive for Business, it has a very high capacity. We mentioned it's a terabyte of space per user. So what can happen, let's say you've got 30 users and they're all synchronizing things down from the cloud. Somebody decides, you know what, I'm going to move this big folder from our server up to OneDrive for Business because this is great information to be shared in OneDrive. And it's a couple hundred gigabytes of information that in turn is going to try to get synced down to all of those local workstations, and you can essentially fill up or crash a whole bunch of machines very quickly by doing something like that. So the local sync is handy, but you have to be very careful and very cautious there of how you use that. So we do not recommend using a blanket setting to locally sync things down on everybody's machine. That's a great way to crash a whole bunch of machines really quickly. Okay, file conflicts can occur, and that also goes with that local sync. So we talked about that scenario where you've got files that you're using on an airplane. Well, maybe while you're on that plane, somebody else is changing that same file. So when you get back, you go to sync that up, and it's saying, there's already another change to this file that somebody else made, but it's older than the date that you've got here and which one do I save. It can create those kind of conflicts. Anytime that you have offline file usage, those types of file conflicts can occur. And they're not really well resolved with OneDrive, frankly. So that's something to consider as well. Requires some expertise on the back end. It is SharePoint Online, as we mentioned, on the back end. There are businesses and people that make a career out of SharePoint. SharePoint has many options to it. There's a lot of configuration to it. So it does require some knowledge of what a SharePoint site is, what a SharePoint library is. For example, when you're applying permissions in SharePoint, you apply them to libraries. It's not quite as granular as setting NTFS permissions on a server. So it's not going to be quite as easy as you may be used to if you're used to setting permissions on a server. And that's another point to make here, is OneDrive for Business is really meant to replace storing data on a server. So you've got your data in the cloud, but not in the server. Some people may not want that. They may like having that quick file access on their local server, and they want file access in the cloud as well. OneDrive for Business may not be the best solution for that. There are other cloud solutions that can do that, that will synchronize files to your server instead of your local machine, and also give you cloud access to those. So depending on what is the business need for you, OneDrive for Business may or may not be the right answer. Okay, and last but not least, data security really needs to be kept in mind here. If you think about that, let's say you've got some information that you're putting into OneDrive. Let's just say it's got some protected information in there, and you've got local sync set up. That's taking that protected information and downloading it to maybe 30 different computers. So now you've got 30 endpoints out there that have this data that become a potential risk to you. So there needs to be some very careful consideration of what data you're putting in OneDrive. You know, if you have protected information, maybe that's not the best thing to be putting up in OneDrive. If there's a strong business case for it, that's fine. You just have to make sure on the back end there's a lot of different settings to secure that data. And particularly with mobile devices, you may need something like Microsoft Intune to properly secure the mobile end of things. Okay, so those are things that are areas of concern with OneDrive for Business. So what I'm going to do next here, I'm going to actually take a break from PowerPoint, and I'm going to take a look at some of the ways to access your OneDrive for Business data on your computer. So bear with me here while I exit my PowerPoint. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a couple of settings tabs here. So you can't see my other screen here, but I'm clicking on my icons for OneDrive for Business and for my personal OneDrive. Now here they look very similar. Unfortunately, they're both the blue cloud. This one was actually a white cloud in my system tray. The dead giveaway of which one is which is if you look down here at the storage space. So you've got 5 gigs of storage here. That's my personal OneDrive. And over here, I've got a terabyte of space. That is my OneDrive for Business. So that's kind of the ringer to know right away which one am I actually looking at here. So with the personal OneDrive, you can choose folders like your documents and pictures. And that's really, as we said, what the personal OneDrive is meant for, is your personal documents. And OneDrive for Business is where you're going to be setting up folders more like a shared drive on a server here. So that's what we've got set here. Files on demand, this setting, save space and download. If you have that unchecked to not save space, it's going to locally synchronize all those files down, and that's where you're going to get into trouble of filling up people's hard drives. So by saving space, what that means is the files are going to be stored in the cloud, and as you want to work on those files and you click on them, it will download them so you can work on them locally. So that's that setting we were talking about earlier. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring up two different windows here. I've logged into a web browser and I've logged into my Office 365 account. I've gone into OneDrive for Business, and I've got some folders here that I've actually uploaded into the cloud. And you can see here, if I click into my hosted PBX folder here, it's a whole bunch of different files here that I've uploaded. I'm going to show you a different view. I'm going to open up something it's Windows File Explorer here. Normally, you're probably used to seeing things like your C drive and your network. I've got my OneDrive Personal, but I've also got my OneDrive for Business linked to my File Explorer here. And this technical library, if I click in here, you can see these are the same set of files that I'm accessing through the web browser as I'm accessing through File Explorer here. So one thing you'll notice is I do have a status for these files. So here, this cloud means that the files are stored in the cloud. They're available for download on demand, but I've got them stored in the cloud. This checkbox here is a green circle with a white checkbox. That means that I've selected this folder to be available on my machine all the time, downloaded all the time, or available offline all the time. So maybe there's files in here that I want to work on my laptop when I'm home or on an airplane, and I do that a lot. This folder I've chosen to always be available on my local computer. Now, there's a third option here. I'm going to click into a folder here. You can see one of these files has a white circle with a green checkbox. And what that means is I've downloaded that particular file to work on it so that it's brought that file down locally. It's available on my device, as you can see here with the status. So if I pick another one of these, see it's in the cloud right now. I'm going to double click this file here. And you can see this, it changed to that green checkbox, which means it downloaded it to my machine, and here's the file. It's on my other screen here. But it downloaded it, and it's allowing me to open that with my local version of Office. Another key point there. Because I'm using this File Explorer option, it's using my local version of Office to open files. So what that means is you can't do the collaboration that we talked about unless you're using the online version of Office. And I'm going to show you that in a minute here. Just for anyone that's interested, behind the scenes, all of this is managed by something called Windows Storage Sense. That is something that is built into Windows 10. So you don't get these nice statuses the same way in older versions of Windows. But if you're running Windows 10, you're going to get all of this the same way you see it on my screen here. Okay, one more point here on this particular interface here. If I were to right-click on this particular file, go to Restore Previous Versions, this is actually not the version history that comes with OneDrive for Business. This is Microsoft Windows built-in, what they call the VSS writers that store those. So it's not the same thing. If you want to use the version history that comes with OneDrive for Business, you have to use that online with their browser-based access. So I'm going to minimize my File Explorer access now and actually go to the web portion now so I can show you that. So I've got a test folder here. I'm going to click into this. And you can see I've got a test spreadsheet here. If I were to right-click on this folder now you can see I've got something called version history. If I look at that, it's going to give me all the iterations of when I modified this file. You can see they're all fairly new, because an hour ago I accidentally deleted this and had to rebuild it. But if you wanted to see that, you can click these ellipses here, and it gives you options to either restore or open the file or delete that version if you want. So a very nice version history that comes with OneDrive for Business here. Okay, another feature is if I want to upload files, I can simply drag and drop them into this web portion here. So I'm going to take a particular file here. I'm just going to drag it in. and you can see it's uploading, and bingo, there it is. Now, just an important point about the web UI here, the interface, you can see right now that both of the documents in that folder have a checkbox. So even though I just uploaded this one, all the files have the checkbox. So what I did this morning, I right-clicked here and I said, delete this, and I deleted everything in my folder. So you want to make sure you're really only selecting the files that you want to work with. I'm going to delete this here. And it's gone. So what it did, it moved it to a recycle bin, just like on your PC, you've got a recycle bin. Key difference between the two. The recycle bin in the cloud gets cleaned out every 30 days, whereas your local PC on your desktop, you choose when you want to do that, or you could set a company policy or a group policy to do that. But with the OneDrive for Business, after 30 days, stuff that's in there is going to get removed. So just a point to notice. Okay, other things you can do here, if I right-click on this file, I can do share. It's easy as typing in somebody's email address and hit send. And they're going to get a link that's going to give them direct access to that file in your SharePoint Online. So it's that easy to do. Also, I'm going to back up here. And notice here, we've got options for local sync. But you may have noticed I had a HIPAA folder here. So I'm just saying maybe that has some protected information in there. You'll notice that the sync button is not there for this one, because I've gone in the back end and said, you know what, I don't want people to be able to synchronize my HIPAA folder down to their PCs, because that gives me another point that I have to protect that data. I don't want that. I want it to be only accessible through the cloud. And if I come back up to my File Explorer view, you'll notice the HIPAA folder is not seen there. So that's part of what you can do from a security standpoint there. Okay, and last but not least here, I'm going to go into my spreadsheet here. And you'll notice right there very quickly, it opened that file with Excel Online. If you saw that, that's the key to being able to do the collaboration, is you have to open it in Excel Online. So right now, and here it is right here, I could be changing this. If you've been part of any Colden Company webinars, you know we use a lot of flux capacitors here. And maybe we ordered some more, and now we have 9 flux capacitors. It's automatically going to save, but with our Teams webinar, we had another gentleman from Colden Company modifying it at the same time as me. I don't have him on today, but the same thing applies, where both of us could be modifying this. What you would see is another highlighted cell that that person has. So if they're modifying a particular cell, that one would be highlighted in their color for what they're doing. So the collaboration feature is a very nice feature that is usable within OneDrive for Business. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is switch back to my PowerPoint here. And I've got a quick slide here that shows you I had the OneDrive app on my phone, and notice all the same folders there that I could access on my phone as well. So that's just another way to get at that data. So if you want to be successful in deploying OneDrive for Business, here's some keys. Number one is you have to do your homework ahead of time. I hope that the takeaway from this is it's not as easy as just turning it on and jumping in. That's the recipe for failure. You really want to take a look at the kind of data that you've got and decide what data do you really want to be available in the cloud. And you're going to have to make that decision about, do we want to have things on the server and in the cloud? If so, maybe OneDrive for Business isn't the right place for that. Do you want to go solely with the cloud? Maybe OneDrive for Business is right. But you really want to decide on what data is going to be in the cloud. Is it secure? What kind of protected information do you have? Who should have access to that? Because you can set up groups and restrict access to libraries based on groups. And you want to do a cleanup of your data ahead of time. And there's some reasons for that. So things like the collaboration work best when your files are in the newer format of Microsoft Office. So if you're familiar with the doc versus docx format, the docx is the newer XML-based format. Those files work much better with the online versions of Office than the old doc and XLS file. So it may be worthwhile, if you're going to have files that you're collaborating on, making sure they're all in the newer Office format before you bring them up to the cloud. There's also some concerns about some special characters. It doesn't like certain special characters and file names. You might want to clean that stuff up before you upload it. So do that kind of legwork ahead of time to plan it out. So the second bullet point here is plan it holistically. So figure out, as an organization, where is OneDrive for Business going to help us? So plan that ahead of time, but test specifically. So have the plan, but then have a kind of a team of people that are going to champion this and have a test case. So this might be an area where we can use OneDrive for Business. Let's roll it out. Have somebody in your organization that's championing it. Roll it out, and then use it. My recommendation is take away other options for accessing data besides OneDrive for Business if you're going to go forward with it. Don't have it still sitting, have a copy of it sitting on your server, because if people can do things the way they've always done it, that's the way they're going to do it. They're going to do it the same way they've always done it. So take away that option, kind of force people to use it. You're going to get a better test run if you're doing it that way. And the middle bullet point that I skipped over is make sure, if you're using this, that you've got good backup. And again, the built-in backup we find to be a little bit inadequate from Microsoft. So we've got some better solutions there for you. Okay, I've already run past 11:30 here, so if you've been with Colden Company for any length of time, this is a saying that you've heard many times. If you're running your business the same way you were 2 or 3 years ago, you're not staying the same, you're falling behind. So keeping up with some of the new technology is going to keep your business ahead of your competition, because really that's the way you have to look at it, is your competition isn't staying the same. They're taking advantage of some of these new things. You need to look at what's going to make sense for you and your business. Okay, so let's open it up here for questions. And while I'm taking some of these questions here, I'm just going to put my contact information up on the screen so you can reach out to me at any time. And I did see a couple come in here, so give me a second to read. Okay, says, I think I know what this means. Do you need a Microsoft account to open it should be a shared file with people? So I'm assuming what you're saying there is you use that share, you send that file out to somebody, do they need to have a Microsoft account? So the answer to that is no, if you've left the settings as the default. So by default, they're going to be able to click on that link and get access straight into your SharePoint Online. You may not want that. You may want to set up some security and require username and password to access that file, but by default, they will not need a Microsoft account to get to that file. Okay, next question here, is there a way to see who changed a file? Yes, so bear with me here. I'm going to exit the PowerPoint and bring up my web version here. And again, the web version is going to be a little bit more fully functional than the File Explorer version. So if I click here and go to version history, here you've got your modified by. So that's going to tell you who modified a file and when. You can see during the presentation here, I added some flux capacitors in, right? So this particular spreadsheet, I'm the only one that's modified it, so they all say modified by me. But if someone else were to have made a modification, that would show with their name in there as well. So that's how you would do that. Okay, those are the only questions that popped in here. So I hope the takeaway for today is OneDrive for Business can be a great tool. You just have to balance the security of it and the usability and decide whether or not that's the right tool for your business. and plan it out. And that's what we're here for. We're here to help. So we thank everybody for joining us today. And please reach out at 888-600-4560 or reach me by email if you have any questions on today's presentation. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.